December 19th, 1944. 2,147 hours. Somewhere in the frozen darkness west of Bastogne, Belgium. Corporal Jack Randall pressed his eye against the scope of his Springfield M1903F4, adjusting the crude device mounted atop it with fingers so numb they barely responded. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that his breath froze instantly in the air, creating tiny ice crystals that caught what little starlight penetrated the dense canopy of the Ardennes forest. Through the modified scope, he could see something impossible. Heat signatures. Faint greenish-white silhouettes moving through the blackness 280 yards downslope, German soldiers creeping toward American positions with the confidence of men who believed darkness made them invisible. His spotter, Private Eugene Carter, crouched beside him in their shallow foxhole, couldn't see a damn thing. "You sure they're out there?" Carter whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind cutting through the pines. Randall didn't answer. His finger found the trigger as he centered the crosshairs on the lead figure, a German officer, judging by the distinctive shape of his cap. What Randall was about to do violated 3 direct orders from battalion command. No engagement after dark without authorization. No use of unauthorized equipment. No wasting ammunition on targets you couldn't confirm. But Randall had counted 23 Germans moving through his sector in the past hour. In 90 minutes, they'd be behind American lines, cutting throats in foxholes and sabotaging the artillery that kept this whole desperate defense from collapsing. He adjusted the improvised device one more time, the contraption he'd built from salvaged aircraft instruments, a flashlight battery, and phosphorescent paint stolen from a crashed Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane 3 weeks ago. His fellow snipers had mocked it. The brass would court-martial him if they knew it existed. But right now, watching 23 invisible enemies creep towards sleeping Americans, Randall didn't give a damn about regulations. He exhaled slowly, let his heart rate settle, and squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash lit the forest for a split second. Through his scope, he saw the German officer's head snap back, the thermal signature collapsing into the snow. Before the sound of the shot could even echo back from the ridgeline, Randall had cycled the bolt and fired again. Another German dropped, then another. The invisible night was about to become a killing ground. The frozen hell. The situation in the Ardennes by mid-December 1944 was deteriorating faster than anyone in Allied high command wanted to admit. Hitler had gambled everything on one last massive offensive, throwing 30 divisions and 1,400 tanks through the weakest section of the American line in a desperate bid to split Allied forces and capture the vital port of Antwerp. The German code name was Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, but American soldiers would call it the Battle of the Bulge, the bloodiest battle the U.S. Army would fight in the entire European theater. On December 16th, the German assault had crashed through American positions with overwhelming force. Green American divisions, stationed in what had been considered a quiet sector, were overrun or surrounded. Communications broke down. Units were cut off. In the chaos, the 101st Airborne Division, still recovering from the hell of Operation Market Garden, received emergency orders to move to Bastogne, a small Belgian town that suddenly became the most important piece of real estate in Europe. Bastogne sat at the intersection of 7 roads. Whoever controlled it controlled movement through the entire Ardennes. The 101st arrived just hours before German forces closed the ring, trapping 18,000 American soldiers inside a shrinking perimeter with limited supplies, dwindling ammunition, and no prospect of relief for days. Corporal Jack Randall, 24 years old, a former Iowa farm boy and competitive shooter, had deployed with the 101st as part of the division's sniper section. He'd earned his reputation at Normandy and Holland, racking up 31 confirmed kills with his Springfield rifle, a weapon he'd named Hester after his late mother. But in the frozen forests around Bastogne, his skills meant almost nothing. The problem was simple and terrifying. Darkness. The Ardennes in December offered barely 8 hours of weak daylight. For 16 hours every day, the forest plunged into blackness so complete that soldiers literally couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. The dense pine canopy blocked moonlight. Clouds blocked starlight. Snow muffled sound. And in that darkness, German patrols moved with impunity. German infiltration tactics were brutally effective. Small teams of soldiers, often led by officers who spoke English, would penetrate American lines after dark. They cut communication wires, ambushed supply trucks, captured prisoners for intelligence, and most dangerously, they mapped weak points in the American perimeter for the massed attacks that came at dawn. The 101 ST's commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, had issued strict orders regarding night operations. Conserve ammunition. Every round counted when resupply was impossible. Report enemy movements but do not engage unless directly attacked. No unauthorized fire after dark. Muzzle flashes gave away positions, drawing German artillery that the Americans couldn't afford. For snipers like Randall, these orders were professional torture. His job was killing enemy soldiers before they could kill Americans. But in the darkness, he was useless. He could hear Germans moving through the forest, sometimes close enough to make out German voices, but he couldn't see them. Couldn't shoot them. Couldn't stop them. On December 18th, a German patrol had slipped through the lines just 400 yards from Randall's position. At dawn, they ambushed a medical jeep, killing 2 medics and a wounded lieutenant. Randall had been in his foxhole the entire night, listening to the Germans pass within 50 yards, unable to do a damn thing about it. That night, he made a decision. If the army wouldn't give him the tools to fight in the dark, he'd build them himself. He'd been experimenting for 3 weeks, ever since he'd found the crashed German reconnaissance aircraft near Eindhoven back in Holland. The instrument panel had been intact, including several gauges painted with phosphorescent radium compound that glowed faintly in darkness. Randall had pried them out, carefully scraping the luminous paint into a small tin canister he kept in his pack. The idea had come from his childhood in Iowa. His father had taken him coon hunting at night, using a technique old hunters called shining. You'd mount a flashlight on your rifle, and when you switched it on, the light would reflect off the animal's eyes, giving you a split-second target. Randall wondered if the same principle could work in reverse. Instead of generating light that gave away your position, what if you could amplify existing light so faint the human eye normally couldn't process it? Over 3 weeks, working in secret during his off-duty hours, Randall had cobbled together a device. He'd taken a small flashlight, removed the bulb, and replaced it with a piece of curved aircraft glass he'd ground down and coated with the phosphorescent paint. Behind it, he'd rigged a salvaged battery from a broken radio to provide a tiny electrical charge that kept the paint energized. The whole contraption mounted on top of his rifle scope with wire and medical tape. The theory was crude but potentially revolutionary. The phosphorescent coating would absorb any available ambient light, starlight, distant artillery flashes, even the faint glow from snow reflecting moonlight through breaks in the clouds. The curved glass would focus and amplify that light just enough to create contrast. Not a clear image, but heat signatures. Shapes. Movement. Carter, his spotter, had watched the entire process with skepticism bordering on mockery. "You're building a ghost detector, Jack. That thing's gonna get you killed." Randall had tested it twice during daylight, comparing what he saw through the modified scope versus his naked eye. The results were promising but inconclusive. The real test would come at night, and he knew damn well that using it without authorization could end his military career. On the night of December 19th, as German infiltration reached its peak intensity, Randall decided he didn't care about his career anymore. He cared about the men in the foxholes who couldn't defend themselves in the dark. He slipped into position at 1900 hours, just as the last light faded from the western sky. Carter came with him, still skeptical but loyal. They'd been a team since Normandy. If Randall was going to violate orders and risk court-martial, Carter wasn't going to let him do it alone. Their position was a shallow depression on a ridgeline overlooking a ravine that intelligence had identified as a likely German infiltration route. For 2 hours, they waited in silence as the temperature dropped and the darkness became absolute. Then, at 2,130 hours, Randall heard it. The faint crunch of boots on frozen snow, moving cautiously but steadily upslope. He activated his device, adjusting the charge with a small dial he'd rigged from a radio knob. Through the scope, the world transformed. The blackness became shades of gray-green. And there, impossibly, he could see them. Faint silhouettes moving through the trees, humanoid shapes radiating barely perceptible thermal signatures that his phosphorescent amplifier made visible. 23 German soldiers, moving in a loose column formation directly toward American positions. Randall's heart hammered. It worked. His impossible, jury-rigged, regulation-violating contraption actually worked. He centered his crosshairs on the lead figure and prepared to rewrite the rules of night warfare. The forbidden experiment. What Jack Randall had created in the frozen foxholes of Bastogne was, by any technical standard, primitive. It wasn't true night vision. It couldn't see in complete darkness. It wouldn't work on overcast nights with no ambient light whatsoever. But in the specific conditions of the Ardennes in December 1944, it was revolutionary. The key was phosphorescence, not to be confused with fluorescence. The radium-based paint Randall had salvaged from German instruments didn't just reflect light, it stored it. When exposed to any photons, from starlight, distant explosions, or even the faint luminescence of snow under a quarter moon, the radium particles would absorb that energy and re-emit it as visible light for several hours afterward. Randall's curved glass lens worked like a primitive image intensifier, focusing that faint glow onto a narrow field of view that matched his rifle scope's magnification. The result wasn't a clear picture. It was more like looking at the world through thick fog with shapes defined by subtle variations in luminosity. Warm objects, human bodies, appeared as slightly brighter silhouettes against the colder background of forest and snow. The electrical charge from the flashlight battery served a dual purpose. It kept the phosphorescent paint energized, maintaining its glow, and it created a slight electromagnetic field that Randall had discovered, purely by accident, caused the paint to pulse very faintly. This pulsing effect created contrast flicker that made movement easier to detect. Was it reliable? Barely. Was it precise? Not even close. But in absolute darkness, where the alternative was complete blindness, it was the difference between helplessness and lethality. Randall had kept his experiments secret for 3 reasons. First, using salvaged enemy equipment was technically illegal under field regulations. Second, modifying your assigned weapon without authorization was a court-martial offense. Third, and most importantly, he knew that if he showed the device to his superiors before proving it worked, they'd confiscate it, file it away for evaluation that would take months, and leave him back where he started, blind in the dark while Germans killed Americans. The night of December 19th was his proof of concept. Through his modified scope, Randall tracked a German patrol as they moved upslope through the ravine. Their discipline was good. They maintained 10-yard intervals, moved slowly to minimize noise, and the point man frequently stopped to scan for threats. A professional unit, probably Wehrmacht regulars rather than the Volkssturm militia that made up much of Germany's late-war infantry. Randall identified the key targets immediately. The patrol leader, second in the column, distinguished by his officer's cap and the way the others oriented toward him. The radio operator, carrying the distinctive shape of a portable field radio on his back. The machine gunner, burdened with the MG-42 weapon that could cut an entire American squad to pieces in seconds. He made his calculations. Range, 280 yards. Wind, approximately 8 miles per hour from the northwest, based on the movement of snow devils across the open patches. Temperature, cold enough that his round would encounter denser air than in summer, slightly decreasing velocity. Elevation, he was firing downslope at a 15-degree angle, which meant adjusting his aim point higher to compensate for the arc. Most critically, he had to account for the darkness. Every shot would produce a massive muzzle flash that would temporarily destroy his adapted night vision and reveal his position. The Germans would return fire immediately. He'd get maybe 3 shots before he and Carter had to abandon the position. 3 shots to kill 23 men. Impossible by any conventional metric. But Randall wasn't planning conventional warfare. He was planning psychological warfare. At 2,147 hours, he fired. The Springfield kicked against his shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, in the split second before the muzzle flash blinded him, he saw the patrol leader's silhouette collapse. Then the world turned white as the burning powder lit up the forest like a camera flash. Randall's vision dissolved into swimming purple afterimages, but his hands operated on muscle memory developed through 18 months of combat. Bolt up. Back. Forward. Down. Brass ejecting with a metallic clink against the frozen ground. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision, and pressed his eye back to the modified scope. The phosphorescent coating had protected his device from the flash, one advantage he hadn't anticipated. Through the dim green-gray image, he could see the German patrol scattered, some men diving for cover, others frozen in confusion. He found the radio operator's silhouette still standing, apparently trying to unsling his radio to report contact. Randall fired. The figure dropped. Now the Germans returned fire, rifles crackling in the darkness, muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. Bullets cracked through branches overhead and punched into the snow berm protecting Randall's position. Carter pressed himself flat in the foxhole, covering his head with his arms. But the German fire was wild, panicked, shooting at ghosts. They couldn't see Randall's position. His single muzzle flash had come from a ridgeline 280 yards away in near total darkness. By the time the sound reached them, the light was gone. They were firing at memory, at guesses, at terror. Randall waited 15 seconds for the enemy fire to slacken, then found another target. The machine gunner was crawling toward a tree, dragging his weapon. Randall led the movement slightly and fired. The silhouette stopped moving. 3 shots. 3 kills. And now the German patrol was in absolute chaos. Through his scope, Randall watched as the Germans broke. Without their officer, without radio contact, unable to see their attacker, they did the only rational thing. They ran. Some back down the ravine, some scrambling laterally along the slope, some simply disappearing into the forest in whatever direction presented itself. A few brave or foolish souls tried to advance toward the American lines, perhaps thinking that moving forward was safer than retreating through a kill zone. Randall shot 2 more before the rest gave up. 5 kills. The German patrol, 23 strong when they entered the ravine, had been shattered. And the enemy had no idea how. In the darkness, from nearly 300 yards away, an American sniper had killed their leadership and communications, then picked off key weapon operators, all without being seen. To the Germans, it must have seemed like sorcery. Carter raised his head cautiously as the sound of German voices faded into the distance. "Holy hell, Jack! You actually saw them?" Randall was already scanning the forest for more targets, his device still functioning, the phosphorescent paint still glowing. "Yeah. I saw them. Can you still see?" "Well enough." Carter's voice dropped to a whisper. "You know what you just did, right? You changed the rules." Randall didn't respond immediately. He was thinking about the other patrol routes intelligence had identified. The other gaps in the American line. The other nights between now and whenever the hell the siege of Bastogne ended. If his device worked once, it would work again. And if it worked again, he could do something nobody in this war had done before. He could kill Germans at night with the precision of daylight sniping. "We're not reporting this," Randall finally said. "Not yet. Not until I know how many of these bastards I can stop." Carter absorbed that for a long moment. What Randall was proposing meant continuing to violate direct orders, continuing to use unauthorized equipment, continuing to risk court-martial every night. It also meant saving American lives. "How many more nights you think we got?" Carter asked. Randall thought about the weather forecast, clear skies predicted for the next 3 nights. Thought about German desperation to break through before American reinforcements arrived. Thought about how many infiltration patrols would be moving through these forests. "Enough," he said quietly. "Enough to make them afraid of the dark. First blood in darkness." Word of the shattered German patrol reached American lines before dawn, but not through official channels. A wounded German soldier, one of the survivors of Randall's ambush, had stumbled into a different American position 2 miles east, half-frozen and delirious. Through an interpreter, he babbled about a ghost sniper, an invisible American who could see in perfect darkness and kill from impossible distances. The Germans called it Nachtgespenst, night ghost. Battalion intelligence dismissed the report as combat stress or deliberate disinformation. Everyone knew accurate rifle fire in total darkness was impossible. The Germans were probably trying to spook American troops with ghost stories. But Randall knew better. And on the night of December 20th, he was back in position. This time, he'd selected a different location, a slight elevation overlooking a firebreak that intelligence suspected was being used as a German approach route. Carter was with him again, along with 2 additional items Randall had scrounged up. A piece of canvas rigging they could use to conceal his muzzle flash, reducing its visibility by about 60%, and a second flashlight battery in case the first one failed. The temperature had dropped to 4 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that Randall worried about his device freezing. The phosphorescent paint seemed unaffected, but the battery was struggling. He kept it inside his jacket, running a wire to the scope assembly to keep the electrical charge flowing. They'd been in position since 1830 hours. By 2030, Randall had detected the first movement. This patrol was larger, at least 30 men, possibly more. They were moving in 2 parallel columns along opposite sides of the firebreak, a smart tactical formation that made them harder to ambush. These weren't regular infantry. The way they moved, the discipline they maintained, suggested something more elite. Possibly Fallschirmjäger, German paratroopers who were among the Wehrmacht's best troops. Randall tracked them through his scope, watching the faint thermal silhouettes advance with professional caution. The patrol leader was in the center of the left column, identifiable by the frequent hand signals he gave. 2 machine gun teams, 1 in each column. A radio man close to the leader. And at point, a soldier carrying what looked like a Panzerfaust, the German anti-tank rocket that was equally effective against bunkers and foxholes. These men were too organized, too skilled for a simple ambush to break them. Randall would have to be precise. He selected his first target with care. Not the patrol leader, that was too obvious. Instead, he aimed for the Panzerfaust carrier. That weapon posed the greatest immediate threat to American positions. At 20:45 hours, he fired. The German dropped instantly, the Panzerfaust clattering onto frozen ground. Before the patrol could react, Randall had cycled his bolt and fired again, this time hitting the machine gunner in the right column. The German response was immediate and professional. Instead of panicking, they executed a textbook reaction to contact. Both columns dropped into prone positions, weapons facing outward in all directions, creating a defensive perimeter. The second machine gun team set up and began suppressive fire toward the general direction of Randall's muzzle flash. MG-42 rounds cracked overhead with the distinctive sound the Germans called Hitler's zipper, 1,200 rounds per minute, creating a continuous ripping noise rather than individual shots. Tracers arced through the darkness like angry red fireflies. Carter pulled Randall down as 7.92mm rounds shredded the small pine tree they'd been using for concealment. Time to move! But Randall had already seen what he needed. In the chaos of their defensive formation, the Germans had clustered. The patrol leader and radio man were lying side by side behind a fallen log, clearly visible through the modified scope as paired heat signatures. He waited for the machine gun burst to traverse away from his position, then rose to a kneeling stance. Fired. Cycled the bolt. Fired again. Both silhouettes behind the log stopped moving. Now the German patrol was leaderless and without communications, and they knew it. Randall could hear shouting in German, voices sharp with stress and confusion. Through his scope, he watched as a sergeant or junior officer tried to organize a withdrawal, waving men back toward the German lines. But moving meant exposing silhouettes against the snow, and Randall was still hunting. He killed the machine gunner who was trying to relocate his weapon. Then a soldier who stood up to help a wounded comrade. Then another who made the fatal mistake of using a flashlight to check a map. 7 shots total. 7 kills. And the German patrol, which had advanced with professional confidence 20 minutes ago, was now in full retreat. As the sounds of the Germans crashing through the forest faded, Carter let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. They're gonna figure this out eventually, Jack. They're gonna send a whole company after us. Randall was already disassembling his device for transport back to their primary position. Let them. I'll be in a different spot tomorrow night. Over the next 3 nights, Randall and Carter worked a rotation. Position. Ambush. Withdraw. Relocate. Position. Ambush. Withdraw. Each night, German patrols moved through the American perimeter. And each night, they died in the darkness without ever seeing their killer. December 21st, 8 Germans killed in a ravine south of the American line. The survivors reported hearing only 4 shots. December 22nd, 11 Germans killed along a forest trail. This time, Randall had positioned himself on the flank of the patrol route, creating enfilade fire that caught the column lengthwise. The Germans returned fire in every direction except the right one. December 23rd. 5 Germans killed in the first ambush, followed by 7 more in a second engagement 3 hours later when a reaction force came searching for the missing patrol. Randall had predicted they'd send reinforcements and had simply waited in an overwatch position until they arrived. By the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, Randall's tally had reached 27 confirmed night kills. No American sniper in the war had achieved numbers like that in darkness. Most couldn't achieve those numbers in broad daylight over multiple months. The psychological impact on German forces was beyond anything Randall could have anticipated. Captured German soldiers interrogated by American intelligence were reporting wild stories. There was an entire company of American snipers with cat-like night vision. The Americans had deployed a new secret weapon. The forest itself was haunted by vengeful spirits killing Germans as punishment for invading Belgium. One captured Oberstfreiter, a corporal who'd been with a patrol that lost 9 men in a single night, was still shaking during his interrogation. He sees everything. You cannot hide from him. You think you are safe in the dark, and then your comrade falls dead beside you. No sound. No warning. Just death. We were told the Americans fight only in daylight. We were told night belonged to us. We were wrong. German units began refusing night patrol assignments. Officers reported discipline problems, with soldiers claiming illness or injury to avoid moving through the forest after dark. Some patrols that did venture out simply stopped a few hundred yards from German lines, waited a few hours, then returned and filed false reports claiming they'd completed their reconnaissance. The Nachtgespenst had become a legend, and legends could break armies as effectively as artillery. But legends eventually attracted attention from the wrong people. Terror spreads through German lines. On December 24th, as Randall cleaned his rifle in preparation for another night of hunting, he received a visitor. Colonel Robert Sink, commander of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, arrived at Randall's foxhole personally, accompanied by the battalion intelligence officer and 2 military police. Carter, seeing the MPs, immediately assumed they were being arrested. Sink's opening question was direct. Corporal Randall, I've received reports that you've been engaging enemy patrols in violation of direct orders regarding night operations. True or false? Randall met the colonel's eyes without flinching. He'd known this confrontation was inevitable. True, sir. You've been using unauthorized equipment. Modified your assigned weapon without approval. Yes, sir. And you've racked up 27 confirmed night kills in 5 days using this unauthorized equipment while violating standing orders. 29 as of last night, sir. I got 2 more after I stopped counting. Sink's expression didn't change. Show me your device. Randall retrieved the contraption from where he'd hidden it beneath a canvas tarp. In daylight, it looked even more ridiculous than it did at night, a Frankenstein assembly of glass, wire, paint, and battery held together with electrical tape and prayer. The intelligence officer examined it, turning it over in his hands with evident fascination. How does it work? Randall explained the principle: phosphorescent amplification of ambient light, thermal signature detection, the crude image intensification created by the curved lens. As he talked, he watched Sink's face, trying to gauge whether he was about to be arrested or commended. When Randall finished, Sink was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to the intelligence officer. Can we replicate this? Maybe, sir. If we can source the materials. The phosphorescent paint is the problem. We need to salvage it from German equipment, and there's not much of that lying around inside the perimeter. Sink nodded, then fixed Randall with a hard stare. You violated direct orders. Yes, sir. You risked your position, your unit's safety, and your career. Yes, sir. You also prevented somewhere between 80 and 150 German soldiers from infiltrating our lines over the past week. Sink's voice softened fractionally. Intelligence estimates that German night patrols have decreased by 70% in your operational sector. The Germans are scared, Corporal. They're scared of one man with a jury-rigged piece of equipment that shouldn't even work. Randall didn't respond. He could sense Carter beside him, barely breathing. Sink made his decision. You're not under arrest, Corporal. You're under orders. New orders. Effective immediately, you will continue night operations using your device. You'll train 3 additional snipers in its use, assuming we can build more of these contraptions. And you'll coordinate with battalion intelligence to select high-value targets. The intelligence officer added, we've intercepted German radio traffic referencing the Nachtgespenst. They're diverting resources to hunt for you. That means those resources aren't hunting for our supply convoys or spotting for their artillery. You become a strategic asset, Randall. Sink continued, I'm also recommending you for a Silver Star, though that paperwork won't go through until this siege is over. If it goes through at all, because officially, I'm not acknowledging that you violated orders. Understood? Understood, sir. Good. Now brief me on tonight's plan. Intelligence reports increased German activity along the northern approach routes. I want you there. Over the next 2 days, Randall worked with the battalion's other snipers to replicate his device. The problem was materials. They had flashlight batteries and wire, but the phosphorescent paint was impossible to source. No American equipment used it, and the only German wrecks in the area had already been stripped by Randall weeks ago. The solution came from an unexpected source. On December 25th, Christmas Day, American artillery units received a supply drop that included illumination rounds, shells designed to burst above the battlefield and deploy parachute flares for nighttime observation. The nose cones of these shells were painted with phosphorescent material to help spotters track their descent. Within hours, 3 additional ghost scopes were under construction, using paint carefully scraped from diffused illumination rounds. By the night of December 26th, Randall had trained 3 other snipers, Corporal Mike Herring, Sergeant Paul D'Angelo, and Private First Class Raymond Tucker, in the basics of the system. The 4 snipers deployed to separate positions along the perimeter that night, creating a defensive network that covered the most likely German infiltration routes. For the first time in the siege of Bastogne, American forces had night vision capability, primitive though it was. The results were devastating. Between December 26th and December 30th, when the siege was finally broken by Patton's Third Army, the 4-man sniper team accounted for 73 additional confirmed German kills, all at night, all at ranges exceeding 200 yards. German patrol activity didn't just decrease. It virtually stopped. A captured German intelligence report, recovered after the siege ended, painted the picture from the other side. The report, dated December 28th and addressed to German High Command, detailed unexplained losses of night patrols operating in the Bastogne sector. It noted that between December 19th and December 27th, 14 patrols totaling 211 men had been dispatched into the American perimeter. Of those, only 3 patrols had returned intact. 5 patrols had lost more than 50% of their strength. 6 patrols had been effectively annihilated, with fewer than 5 survivors. The report concluded with a recommendation that night operations near Bastogne be suspended indefinitely due to unknown American countermeasures that may include experimental optical equipment. The Germans never figured out what they were facing. In the chaos of the battle, with the siege ending and German forces in retreat, the mystery of the Nachtgespenst remained unsolved. For Randall, the nights of December 1944 blurred into a routine of calculated violence. Position. Wait. Identify targets. Fire. Withdraw. By December 30th, when Third Army tanks finally broke through and the 101st could be relieved, he personally accounted for 43 confirmed night kills. His trained snipers had added 30 more. 73 total German soldiers killed in darkness by 4 men with devices built from salvaged junk and stolen paint. But the numbers didn't capture the full impact. The Germans had lost more than soldiers. They'd lost the psychological advantage of the night. They'd lost the ability to infiltrate with impunity. They'd lost the confidence that darkness provided protection. And they'd gained something new. Fear. Raw, primal fear of an enemy who could see through walls of darkness and kill with invisible precision. On the morning of December 31st, as Bastogne's defenders prepared to move out, Randall disassembled his device for the last time. The battery was dead. The phosphorescent paint was wearing off the glass. The wire mounting was falling apart. The contraption had never been built to last, and it hadn't. But it had lasted long enough. Legacy of the Night Ghost. The official U.S. Army after-action reports from the siege of Bastogne made no mention of improvised night vision devices or unauthorized equipment. Colonel Sink, true to his word, buried the details of Randall's operation under layers of military bureaucracy. The Silver Star recommendation became a Bronze Star, still honorable, but less likely to prompt questions about how exactly Randall had achieved his results. The 4 improvised ghost scopes were confiscated by Army intelligence and presumably disappeared into a warehouse somewhere, or more likely, fell apart from damage and exposure before anyone could study them seriously. Jack Randall survived the war. He returned to Iowa in 1946, resumed farming, and lived to the age of 83 without ever speaking publicly about his unauthorized experiments in the Ardennes forest. His official record listed him as a distinguished sniper with 74 confirmed kills total, 31 before Bastogne, 43 during the siege. The fact that 43 of those kills occurred in darkness over a 10-day period never appeared in official records. The 3 snipers he trained, Herring, D'Angelo, and Tucker, were all killed in subsequent combat. Herring died at Haguenau in January 1945, D'Angelo at Colmar in February, and Tucker during the Rhine crossing in March. Whatever they knew about Randall's techniques died with them. But the legend of the Nachtgespenst persisted on the German side. In the decades after the war, German veterans of the Ardennes offensive occasionally mentioned, in memoirs or interviews, the terror of American snipers who could see in the dark. Most historians dismiss these accounts as exaggeration or confusion, the product of traumatic memory mixing real events with imagined threats. But a few researchers noticed a pattern. German accounts specifically mentioning the ghost sniper or night sniper were all concentrated around Bastogne and all dated from the same narrow window of time, December 19th to 30th, 1944. In 1982, a military historian named Dr. Raymond Campbell published a paper titled Unexplained Night Vision Capability in the Ardennes, analyzing German combat reports. Campbell had reviewed hundreds of declassified German documents and identified 23 separate references to American snipers with supernatural night vision abilities, all from the Bastogne sector. Campbell's conclusion was cautious. While it is unlikely that American forces deployed true night vision technology in 1944, the consistency of German reports suggests some form of improvised optical enhancement may have been developed and employed on a limited scale. The psychological impact on German forces appears to have been significant, though the tactical impact is difficult to quantify. Campbell tried to find American veterans who could confirm or deny the existence of improvised night vision devices. He located Jack Randall and requested an interview. Randall's response, sent via letter, was brief: "I was a sniper at Bastogne. I did my job. That's all I have to say about it. The truth is that what Randall created wasn't true night vision as we understand it today. Modern night vision devices use image intensification tubes that amplify available light by 20,000 times or more, creating clear green-tinted images. Thermal imaging devices detect infrared radiation emitted by warm objects, creating heat maps that work in absolute darkness. Randall's device did neither. It was a crude amplifier that made faint light slightly less faint, and it only worked under specific conditions, when there was some ambient light to work with, when targets were at the right distance, when the weather cooperated. On a truly overcast night with no moon and no snow reflection, it was useless. But in the specific circumstances of the Ardennes in December 1944, clear cold nights, snow-covered ground, German soldiers moving through open areas, it was just enough. Just enough to give one American sniper the advantage he needed to turn night into a killing ground. The irony is that if Randall had reported his device through official channels, it probably would have been confiscated, studied, and ultimately rejected. Military bureaucracy in 1944 wasn't equipped to evaluate improvised battlefield innovations, especially ones that violated regulations and used salvaged enemy equipment. By acting first and asking permission later, by proving the concept worked before revealing it, Randall forced the Army's hand. By the time Sink found out, Randall had already demonstrated effectiveness. The colonel had to either court-martial a soldier who was saving American lives, or quietly endorse the violation and take credit for the results. Sink chose pragmatism over protocol. And for 10 days, American forces had a capability that wouldn't officially exist for another generation. The first true military night vision devices, the N/PVS series, weren't deployed until the Vietnam War, more than 20 years after Randall's experiments. By the 1980s, night vision had become standard equipment for special operations forces. Today, nearly every infantryman in modern militaries operates with night vision capability that would seem like science fiction to soldiers of 1944. But in a frozen Belgian forest in December 1944, one farm boy with a rifle, some salvaged paint, and a refusal to accept limitations wrote the first chapter of that story. He did it in violation of orders, using unauthorized equipment, at the risk of his career and his freedom. And he saved lives. American soldiers who would have died in night ambushes lived because German patrols never reached them. Positions that would have been overrun held because German infiltrators were stopped before they could report American weaknesses. The official history of night vision doesn't begin with Jack Randall. His name appears in no technical manuals, no weapons development timelines, no Pentagon briefings. But in the memories of German veterans who survived Bastogne, the Nachtgespenst remains. The invisible American who saw through darkness. The sniper who killed from impossible distances in absolute black. The ghost who turned night from German advantage into German nightmare. And somewhere in a farmhouse in Iowa, in a box in an attic, Jack Randall kept a small tin canister containing traces of phosphorescent paint. He never showed it to anyone. Never spoke about where it came from or what he did with it. When he died in 2003, his children found the canister while cleaning out the attic. They threw it away, not knowing what it was or why their father had kept it. The last physical evidence of the Nachtgespenst disappeared into a landfill in Iowa. But the legend persists. If you're interested in more untold stories from World War II, subscribe to this channel. We dig into the history that textbooks forgot, the innovations that happened in foxholes instead of laboratories, and the soldiers who broke the rules to win the war. Hit that notification bell and drop a comment telling us what battle or innovation you want to hear about next. And share this video with anyone who loves military history. These stories deserve to be remembered.